days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known in this realm as Jaime in Fuego, and if it please you, join me once again for another installment of The Road to the Dark Tower movie here on The Horror Show, a special presentation from yours truly of Infuegotainment. And this is actually a bonus edition that I have been looking forward to so very much as we lead up to the August 4th release date of the Dark Tower movie. Shout out as always to Mr. Bev Vincent, who inspired me to title this segment as such. He wrote a book called The Road to the Dark Tower that I urge all of you to check out. But as you see beside me, this is all of the different Dark Tower stories, right? It's actually not correct. The reason I've been looking so forward to this segment is because I feel that there is an not only underrated story within the Dark Tower canon, but one that perhaps a lot of people who are just fans of the novels proper are not necessarily aware of, because it is its own story. It's its own thing completely, and it's, once again, another young Roland story. And all of you guys who've seen all of my other coverage of the Dark Tower books leading up to the release of the film know that the reason I love The Gunslinger and Wizard and Glass and 4.5, The Wind Through the Keyhole, so very much is because I love the young Roland stuff. It is why I cannot wait to see the possibility of this Ron Howard produced companion television series, provided the Dark Tower is not only good but successful. And hell, even if it's not that good, I'll still be happy if it's successful and we get a television series. But in 1998, a few years after Wizard and Glass had come out, Stephen King was approached for an anthology that had different novellas in it, and he was going to be one of them. But the cool thing was, it was called Legends, Short Novels by the Masters of Modern Fantasy. All of these 11 authors that were chosen for this anthology were all going to be playing within the realm, like the universe, so to speak, that they had already created. So you already had Robert Jordan was doing a story in this, and then you had George R.R. Martin doing a Song of Ice and Fire, or whatever the hell it's called. And yes, I'm not a Game of Thrones fan, but this was way before Game of Thrones was on HBO, you know? So you had stories in those two big fantasy writers' universes. Everyone's seen Robert Jordan stuff, and, you know, Game of Thrones is like one of the biggest things on TV now, which is why I hope that HBO would be handling the Dark Tower prequel series, provided it does indeed happen. But King decided, yes, I'll do it, and I'll write a Dark Tower story. So you gotta figure the later entries of the Tower's pursuit and stuff, they had kind of gone more so into the melding of fantasy and the modern day and stuff like that. But King was like, nope, I'm gonna go pure fantasy for this particular incarnation. And it's a fairly short story, actually, at like 60-something pages, and it was originally released in that 1998 anthology in August, if I'm not mistaken. Went on to win a Locus Award for Best Anthology in 1999, the following year, and it didn't actually see publication for like mass audiences of King fans to check out until 2002, when this collection came out. If the lighting isn't going to totally jack it, let's get a good look. Yes, there we go. So Everything's Eventual was where people finally got to read, who didn't get this very rare anthology, The Little Sisters of Eluria. This is one of my favorite Dark Tower stories as well. Now, I know why is that? You know, I've been hating a little bit on book 5 in my last review, and some may be asking if it's another young Roland story and it was published in 98, why did you wait until after Wolves of the Kala to review it? Well, it's simple because of the fact that Wind Through the Keyhole is in between 4 and 5, despite being written after 7. I know for those who aren't that familiar with the books, this may be getting kind of confusing, but you probably shouldn't be watching this if you haven't seen any of my previous entries. I've already done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 4.5 Wind Through the Keyhole, so jump back and watch those before we jump into this, or don't, you know, I'm not gonna say anything beyond that. But 2002 was when people finally got to check this out, and it's self-encompassing, as I mentioned, and the timeline within which it takes place is after the Battle of Jericho Hill and the fall of Gilead and everything. So all of Roland's original quartet, so my boy Bert and Elaine and Jaime and the other gunslingers, they're all dead, unfortunately, and he is in the infancy of his pursuit of the Man in Black, but this is before the events of the Gunslinger way over there. And so, yeah, it's kind of, if you don't know everything about it, it might be a little bit confusing. So I can imagine people who weren't familiar with the Dark Tower who are just like, yeah, I love Stephen King's horror stuff, and they picked up this book. They probably read The Little Sisters of Eluria, especially being one of the largest stories in this collection of shorts, and they were just like, what the hell is going on? Who is this guy? Or perhaps it piqued their interest to do some research in the early days of the internet and maybe go seek out the series. So that's actually one cool thing about this story, is maybe it could be kind of a gateway drug of sorts to actually pursuing the tower. So another cool tie-in that this short story is all about is the fact that when Roland shows up at this, he's on his horse, and he shows up to what appears to be an abandoned pavilion, right? And so he enters its gates, and he's looking around, and he's like, it's full earth right now. You know, this place should be hustling and bustling. What is going down? Where are all the people? What has happened in this seemingly once beautiful, you know, town, or like, you know, large for Midworld, I suppose. And as he starts looking around, he finally comes across a dog with this like cross of the man Jesus on its back, and it's chewing on this dead kid who's like him and Bert and Elaine and Jamie's age, like all of his homies, his fellow young gunslingers that, you know, all but him have perished in that battle at Jericho Hill. He sees this kid dead in this like trough of water, but he takes notice of this medallion that the kid has around his neck. And so, even though he's fearful of desecrating the dead, he's even more fearful of killing what seems to be like the only survivor in this town. And so, as opposed to killing the dog that is like chewing on this dead kid, he just shoots at it and scares it away. Goes, takes up the medallion, and then suddenly he's ambushed. And he's ambushed by slow mutants, yeah, the same, or at least a similar breed, you know, to, I think they call them the green folk in it. But yeah, they're similar to what Jake and Roland encounter in the cave when they're, you know, pursuing the Man in Black in the Gunslinger over there. But he gets the living crap kicked out of him, and he probably would have died if not for the fact that he's saved by these benefactors in the middle of this pavilion. And the tie-in that I was mentioning is that this pavilion is a now dilapidated version of something that we saw in another Stephen King book. The Talisman. Yeah. So when Jack Sawyer originally jumps over to the territories in the Talisman, which I cannot recommend enough, it kind of shows that it probably took place in days long before Roland was alive. So back before the world moved on is perhaps when Jack Sawyer was jumping to in the territories and stuff. Or maybe things were going on already, because there's slow mutants in the territories. I don't know. All this King stuff is really deep, and it really entails some intense amounts of explanation to really even start to grasp everything that's going down. But it's just really cool because this once vibrant pavilion that had the Queen of the Territories in it, who was a twinnie of the protagonist Jack Sawyer's mom from the Talisman, this place is all destroyed now. And yet the nuns who were caring for this Queen of the Territories in the Talisman, yes, I know this is probably going way over a lot of people's heads, they're seemingly the ones who save Roland from these slow mutants who are going to kill him. And so he gets knocked the hell out, and when he wakes up, he is in a bed and his wounds are being cared for, and there's this other kid who is just down the way from him, and there's this older guy who's like suspended above a bed, and it's really strange. And yet there's a very eeriness about these little sisters who are the nuns who are taking care of them, and you know, you're trying to figure out what their deal is. And the minor spoiler that I'm going to give, and that's because Marvel did a wonderful adaptation of this in 2010. So Marvel, when they were originally adapting those first 5 volumes of their comic books, they did, you know, they did Treachery, and they did The Long Road Home, and Gunslinger Born, and you know, Jericho Hill, and Fall of Gilead, and all that stuff. But when they started their next cycle with The Gunslinger, which was them starting to adapt the original book over there, they decided their second adaptation would in fact be The Little Sisters. So lots of time jumping once again here, or flashbacks, or storytelling, as you know Roland is so big on. But this is vampires in it. Yes. And perhaps King writing about vampires in this story is what kind of jogged him or kind of pushed him to implementing vampires in the Dark Tower 5 for Wolves of Bacala and tying in the Callahan stuff and all this, because he wrote Little Sisters before his accident. And so I'm honestly thinking, yeah, even before, you know, he got run down and that horrible thing and his life was nearly taken, that King was planning to have characters like Sayre in book 6, and he was planning on implementing the Callahan stuff at that point. And so it's up for debate, I suppose, but yes, that is the one minor spoiler that I'll give, is that these nuns that are caring for Roland, they have a thirst for blood. It's the name of a metal album you guys should check out. No, it's actually not. I'm kidding. It should be, though, if it's not. But it's just very interesting in the way he ties in even more stuff, because this young man that is, you know, basically being tended to and yet supremely skeptical as well, that he gives him some backstory, says that he's from Delane, and we all know Delane is where the Eyes of the Dragon took place, so even more connective tissue, which is just so cool. But another thing that I love so very much about this particular story, despite its length, and I wish that there was more meat to it, more stuff to sink my teeth into, I guess you could say, but there is another love story here. And it's because one of the Sisters of Eluria, Sister Jenna, she's the only one that is young and is seemingly not quite in line with the sinister nature of, you know, of these older bloodthirsty women who are not quite what they appear to be. You know, they're nursing people back to health so that, you know, once their blood's all good, you know, they can suck them dry. It's messed up stuff, man. And probably along with the Skin Man in 4.5, some of the most horror stuff that we see in the entirety of the whole Dark Tower series, every entry. And yet this girl decides that first and foremost she's smitten with Roland, and him with her. He's kind of on the rebound, I would imagine, because of what happened, you know, with Ms. Delgado. And so this, as he says in book 5, very, very briefly, he's Todash in book 5 in New York, and he comes across Susanna. And when he comes across Susanna, there's just a brief little exchange, and then he thinks in his head how there was only, after Susan Delgado, one other woman of note. And this is the chick. She's illustrated very beautifully here on the back there. And Sister Jenna, she, without spoiling too much, she decides that she wants to help Roland escape. And it's an intriguing back and forth, and, you know, there's bloodshed, there's betrayal. As much as I would like to talk about, you know, the significance of the end and everything that transpires, it's beautiful, and it's sad, and it's so engaging. The story of the Little Sisters of Eluria, it's not for everybody, though. I've talked to certain fans of the Tower, certain diehard fans of the Tower, and they're just like, it's forgettable, it is what it is, it didn't really do too much for me. But this, I love this story, you guys, and I'm just so saddened that it often falls by the wayside because of the fact that King just made it its own little thing, and yet it does tie in with the lore. You know, we hear about his pursuit of the Man in Black, as we mentioned. You know, there's references to things that have happened both before and things that will happen later in the Gunslinger, so it's a very... It's very cool in the spot where King decided to place it in the timeline, but once again, based on the fact that he wrote it right after Wizard and Glass, and all of the young Roland stuff that makes up the bulk of that book was still probably pretty fresh in his mind, it kind of makes sense that King would crank up the horror a little bit, that he would, you know, set it with more young Roland stuff, because you can imagine he was still enamored with that period of his life. And man, there's a part of me that still hopes King has another young Roland story, even if it's a short one, you know, like the one that appeared here in Everything's Eventual, and, you know, was done so wonderfully by Marvel. I really recommend this graphic novel. It's once again Peter David working on it, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Robin Firth helping him out, and the artwork by Captain America artist Luke Ross is tremendous throughout. It's just such a cool story. And just the interactivity between the slow mutants and these vampire nuns, just kind of the almost strained coexistence of sorts, is really, really cool also. So this is, it's a hidden gem in my opinion, and for me, the elusive white whale of the King collectibles, aside from like the Richard Bachman original paperbacks that I've looked everywhere for. As you can see, and there is one shelf that is not showing here, I am a crazy King collector, and I've, you know, as I've said in videos before, I started at Carey and have read through everything up to just the Bill Hodges trilogy. That's the last thing that I have to read now. I skipped ahead to Revival because I was like, no, I'm going to read all the Bill Hodges in succession, and I've already read Gwendy's Button Box. You can see my review of that here on the Horror Show as well. But yeah, as somebody who's read all of this stuff and just knows the tie-ins, and there's other cool little references. I mean, they reference a particular type of creature that shows up in this, not the two creatures that I mentioned in both Black House, if I'm not mistaken, which is the sequel to the Talisman, the book that I was talking about earlier, and yet also in Dark Tower 6 and in Dark Tower 7, there's brief little passing mentions of these creatures, and so it's just an awesome story that I'm sad gets overlooked sometimes, and probably because of the fact that a lot of people don't know about it. But that white whale that I mentioned is the fact that Donald Grant Publishing, who have done all of the Tower books, you know, at least before they went like mass market in different formats and whatnot, in 2009 they did a limited edition, just standalone novella of the Little Sisters of Eluria with original artwork in it. It was packaged alongside their re-release of The Gunslinger, the very first book, and it sells for so much money. I think I almost put it on my PayPal credit card for like half a G at one point, but I was like, nope, continue the search. You will hopefully one day either be more into money or just find it cheaper. But damn, of all of the amazing Cemetery Dance stuff that I've collected, Subterranean Press, and, you know, just elusive things that I've found of the King, that is the one that I just so badly yearn for. I want that limited standalone novella. So as opposed to being collected like in the Legends, you know, anthology, or in Everything's Eventual that we have here, it's a standalone version with original artwork. I guess for now I just have to continue coming back to this this Little Sisters of Eluria, which once again doesn't really skimp on the story. It actually enhances a few things, and that shows the talent and the diligence of Robin Firth and all of the, I guess, Dark Tower historian duties that she has done an amazing job with. So, and for now, that is where the journey ends, my friends and fellow constant readers. I do hope, once again, that we have been well met. If you somehow stumbled upon this and you're like, yeah, I love Little Sisters of Eluria, it's badass, and you haven't seen any of my prior coverage, come on back with me, guys, and, you know, scope out the Horror Show. We have an entire playlist of all the Stephen King coverage that I've been doing. I have a show called Hail to Stephen King that this is basically a special presentation of Hail to Stephen King today, but it's not always Dark Tower coverage. Next week there's going to be the 6th book, Song of Susanna, which is going to be covered, and then we're going to actually get some Hail proper, doing different topics once again until the 19th of July, when Dark Tower 7, The Dark Tower, gets reviewed by yours truly, and I've got about 100 pages left of Song of Susanna right now. I'm appreciating it in my reread more than I did the first time, because whereas the first 4 volumes I've read over and over countless times, I was not as fond of 5, 6, and 7, and yet I'm really appreciating Part 6 a whole lot more than the one and only previous time that I had read it. So look forward to that review on the 19th of June here, and look forward to the final entry on the 19th of July. But check out those older, more evergreen Hail to Stephen King episodes. There's a ton of them. They've all been tons of fun, and I look forward to so much more coverage in the future, including reviewing the Dark Tower movie here on the Horror Show. I've been Jaime Fuego once again. You can find yours truly on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Like, share, subscribe here on the Horror Show. Connect with me on all that social media funness. I'm constantly talking about the hottest entertainment with an edge of all varieties: horror, fantasy, sci-fi, you know, even comedies and action and comic book stuff. I mean, I just love cinema, not just movies and television, but as you can see, books as well. So until the next time the Wheel of Ka comes around with the next installment of Dark Tower coverage, hasta luego, sin amigos. I hope it's sooner rather than later, and until then, stay scared and read Stephen King's The Dark Tower. Thankee Sai.